Welcome back. We are starting a brand new series today called Practice Makes Perfect, where we're talking about practices of followers of Jesus. And we did talk about this past Sunday. It was kind of why we do practices. And I think the idea for me is that we do them because Jesus did them, and he talked about them. But I really like the fact that he didn't just teach them or tell us to do them, but he actually practiced them himself. And really it comes back to something he told his disciples, that if you really want to be my followers, you have to deny yourself and take up your cross, which means self-denial, denying what yourself and putting God at sort of at the center of your life, or Jesus at the center of your life, and not just something you add to your life.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's where I think spiritual practices come in. They help us in the area of denying ourselves and help us focus our relationship on God. And they're practices that happen at different intervals, as we talked about on Sunday. Some are practices we do every day, like reading the Bible and praying. Others are maybe weekly, some monthly, some yearly, and some are more of what I would call like a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be going over the whole gamut of this in this series. So please stay with us. And today we're going to be talking about the spiritual practice of Sabbath and rest.
Yeah, and I think just this, as you talk about, some of them are lifestyle. I think these ones you can put definitely in their rhythms for sure.
Yeah.
But especially when it comes to rest, definitely a lifestyle of rest.
Yeah.
We're really you're going to hopefully try to implement some of that, hopefully more or less every day. So why we're going to start with rest? Well, it actually, some of the things in kind of reading and preparing from this, it seems to be quite universal. And this is where people like to, when coming into spiritual practices, where a lot of people say they like to start people with. And John Michael Comer writes, "When I offer spiritual direction to people, I often begin by prescribing sleep. Margin, time off work, rest. Because chronically exhausted, sleep-deprived, overly busy people are not loving, peaceful, or full of joy. Restful is essential to apprenticeship under Jesus."
And I think that makes a lot of sense.
It really does.
I mean, if you, I don't like to watch some things on YouTube, and sleep habits, and maybe it's just because the algorithm picks things that I'm interested in.
Absolutely.
But I do know that there are several interesting scientific facts about rest and how important it is to our bodies and to our mental capacity and state. And sure, I agree with you. If you're and our culture kind of promotes this, is that we are constantly being busy, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute.
Yeah.
And so it just drives us to the point of exhaustion.
Yeah, and then going back to what you said kind of in the opening, where Jesus practiced it, we do see in Scripture Jesus would be sleeping.
Yep.
And that's, it's such a weird thing to say, that start off with sleeping is good.
Yep.
Like usually it's not a message. Well, we do hear that message quite a bit, but quite often it's production and go and all that sort of stuff is good. And here rest is something really, really important.
Actually, that came up in a conversation I had at lunchtime today, where the idea that Jesus actually got tired.
Yeah.
And so he had to take a break, and he had to rest. He had to sleep.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us.
So another kind of intriguing thing that I came across in all this, and I actually had a conversation with someone maybe a month ago, and they brought this up, is the Israelites would mark their day from sunset to sunset. They didn't use the clock like we do.
Or sunrise, typically we think about it.
Yeah, we do more sunrise, but sunset to sunset, that was the day.
Yeah, interesting.
So, the beginning of the day was what we mark as the end of the day. And so by doing that, essentially their day would start off in a period of rest.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and then of course as the day went on, you went on to work, and then you start off with
because typically we think about it as I'm up in the morning, I'm at it, I got my most energy in the morning, and by the time I fall into bed at night, I'm exhausted, and it's the end of my day.
It's the thing you do at the end of the day.
Yeah. But to start off with rest, that makes it a different priority.
It really does. Yeah. And so I think that this just sort of seems like another catalyst why this may be just a good place to start when it comes to spiritual practices. because spiritual practice, they have that important spiritual component to them. But I think one thing as we go through this, and I hope everyone will I'm noticing, I hope everyone else will notice too, is that quite often these practices also, although absolutely having an important spiritual component, they actually often even have a practical and physical component as well.
Yeah, so there's a connection to our bodies, and
Absolutely.
we don't always think of our bodies as being connected to our spirits. We sometimes think of body, mind, and soul, or spirit, or whatever, but as distinct things, and they're very interrelated.
Well, and you think about even rest and how important it is into the different aspects of us, the mind, the emotion, the physical, the spiritual, and it's something that kind of rest actually impacts all of those things together.
And if we were to start off with some other spiritual practices that take a little more work, it may feel overwhelming if we started
absolutely.
there. So I think it's a really good place to start with rest.
Yeah. Another thing I think is just really good with rest is the fact that it is kind of countercultural. A.J. Swoboda, when talking about rest and Sabbath, notes that it goes against the very structure and system of the world we've constructed. And he goes on to say that it's an awkward fit in our fast-paced, work-drunk, production-obsessed world.
Wow, production obsessed.
Yeah,
that hits it on the nose.
Yeah, so rest is just something very important. We are simply better at interacting with the world around us with love, joy, empathy, care when we are better rested.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that.
And it's just when tensions, which inevitably are going to happen, we are able to process them and face them in a more healthy way. Because I can think of many times that if I've responded poorly, quite often rest plays some sort of factor, or lack of rest plays some sort of factor into that.
Yeah.
And we are at a culture that is busy, obsessed. Like I definitely could say I've noticed this and participated in this. It's like we have a busyness competition. We kind of tell each other how busy we are, and then we exchange it like we're trying to one-up each other.
Yeah, that happens a lot in conversation. It's almost like a badge of honor.
Yep, exactly what it is.
I got the busyness badge today, so yeah.
And so as a result, our culture is not really good at resting. What we're actually good at usually is numbing out or escaping, or simply disconnecting. Definitely guilty of that. And so we're doing some of those things instead of things like sleep or any kind of rest. And I mean, I've done it. I've watched movies, watched another episode of a show, played another level in a video game. Again, there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's really the issue becomes when it begins to rob us of our ability to rest.
Yeah, I would agree. Right.
So moving on into the idea of practicing rest. It's weird to say that. We got to practice it. But in the Liturgy of Ordinary, Trish Harrison Warren writes, a comprehensive study in the United Kingdom recently revealed that kids learn to rest in the same way they learn to walk, run, and talk. Rest takes practice.
Interesting.
Yeah, that really struck me.
Yeah.
So if you think that you're not very good at rest, that may just be very true. And it may be because we just didn't really learn it. So if anyone's, as we get into this, and you're like, hey, rest, I'm going to start with rest, and you think, hey, I'm not resting, something's not working, I want to encourage you to keep practicing, because it may take a while to get used to it. And I will say, in my own experience, I'm still in that journey of some days I'm a lot better at resting, and I'm getting better at it, but I'm still falling into bad habits that really don't. I enjoy the habits of sometimes, I'll watch another episode of this. And then the next day is like, you know what? I'm not rested.
Yeah, I think we've all fallen into that trap. And I think that goes along with everything you read about, for example, sleep as rest. To develop good sleep habits.
Yeah.
To make sure you turn screens off half hour before you go to bed. Have the room as cool as you can for sleeping. Have it very dark, no light. Don't expose yourself to blue light before you go to bed.
Yep.
Those are all kinds of things that are relatively easy to do.
Yep.
But if you don't think about it, you just don't do them.
Exactly. I mean, even in the idea of doing other things like that are practices that are restful for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is figuring out what it is for you. I know for me, going for a walk Sometimes could be just restful.
Yep.
Reading, for me, is reading, listening to music. And then, so taking time to add those to your life. So what are some practices of rest that you have learned that are, I don't know, working for you?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Two come to mind. One revolves around sleep. And I know when we were younger, my wife and I would often go to bed at different times.
Yeah.
And she was always goes to bed early, and I tended to stay up late. She would get up early, I would get up late. And even though I'm probably more of a morning person than her, which is kind of odd. But I think one of the things that we decided earlier on in our marriage, when that really wasn't working for us, was that we would go to bed at the same time.
Right.
And so we developed a habit of picking a bedtime that was maybe a little later for her, but a little earlier for me. And, we're not always perfect. We do still fall into the trap of maybe watching an extra episode, but we help each other.
Right.
So there's some nights where she'll come to me and say, I'm getting ready for bed, and I'm about to start the next episode. I'm like, okay, maybe I better not, because I'm going to make it late to going to bed. But I do the same thing for her. So I think that is helpful for both of us, just to be able to stay in the habit of going to bed around the same time every day. The other thing for me that I find restful is to start my day off a little slower.
Yeah, I do that too.
I used to get up and just, I'm up and I'm off. But again, when I was younger, I didn't really eat breakfast a lot of times. I'd be at work and kind of munching on the go and work, get ahead. And there was a point where I this kind of was brought to my attention by my family that I wasn't spending enough time with them. So we decided that the best time for us to do that was probably the morning.
Okay.
So I started staying home and helping with breakfast, having breakfast myself. And then once my kids were grown up and gone out of the house, my wife and I have developed the habit of just sitting, reading, listening to music in the morning. And it doesn't mean we don't have appointments in the morning and we have to be places for work or other appointments. But we've created that time for at least an hour. If we get longer than an hour, it feels like a bit of a luxury, but it just helps, your mind to stay calm, to plan for your day. And days don't always go the way you plan.
Yeah.
But quite often just starting off calm as opposed to starting off anxious really does help during the day.
Well, that's really cool.
How about you?
Yeah, for me, probably two things. I mean, definitely I mentioned a few things, but like for me, recreational reading.
Yep.
And definitely because of just what we do, reading is a big component of that.
Sure is.
But like reading something that really is not necessarily about what we're doing, if we're doing a series or whatever, all that. Just sometimes fiction I find really helpful with that. Just kind of getting into that world. Sometimes really, really helps and it allows my brain to be really stimulated nicely. The other thing is just listening to music, and for me, definitely because I like records, so I have a lot of records. Listening to it without a phone around,
Yep.
And just listening to the music and being that, especially doing that with my wife. Sometimes when we do that, and we kind of sit there and just enjoy the music, and that we find that definitely a restful practice.
Excellent. Yeah, those are two good practices.
All right, so moving on to the idea of Sabbath.
Okay, how is Sabbath different from rest?
Well, definitely rest is a component of Sabbath for sure.
Yep.
And Sabbath is more of a period of time, and when it was practiced originally, it was 1 day a week where everyone ceased work, and the idea was to rest.
Sure.
And where the rest we were talking about is probably something you want to try to engage in every day to some degree.
Yep.
This one again,
you need to sleep every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As simple as that. Like, I mean, if you could do other restful practices, that's great, but you need, just if you can sleep well every day, you need to do that. This is about a period of time. And again, as we start off with this, we learned the Israelites would have done it 1 day a week. It's definitely in response to Genesis 2:1-3, where God rested or stopped on the seventh day of creation. Verse 3 of Genesis 2 says, "And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was a day when he rested from all his work of creation."
And then we also find this in the 10 Commandments
That's
from
right.
Exodus 20.
Which is responding to this. Very much.
Exactly the same thing. It's very connected. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each day for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God.
Yeah, so traditionally, they would set aside this day apart to rest.
Sure.
So this idea of set apart or holy, I want to take some of the religiousness out of that.
That would be helpful.
It really just means about setting aside a certain thing
Yeah.
for a certain
for a certain thing.
task.
Yeah.
You know, like I have a few guitars. I have one guitar that's set up for an alternate tuning than your regular standard.
Okay.
It's set up in a certain way so that it holds that tuning a little bit better. It's not that guitar is better. It's set aside for that specific
purpose,
thing.
yeah.
And so this is really what Sabbath is. It's setting aside a time guarding it. And the idea of resting and kind of beyond, because we're going to get a little bit more into that as much as rest is a huge component of Sabbath, it's also a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think modern Christians, we tend to go to church on Sunday.
Yep.
And so many times when I'm speaking with people who do come to church,
Yep.
Their days are not very restful. Church
No.
is one thing that they do in the morning, but then they go shopping after church. They go out for lunch. Their kids have a birthday party. They're getting ready for school. They're finishing homework. And the list goes on and on and on and on
Yeah.
of things that they cram into the day. And every day is like that.
Yep.
So I think we have this idea maybe that, the Sabbath day is holy, so that's the day we go to church. But it's much more than that. It's
It
a
is.
richer experience, yeah.
So I think the best way to start, how do we start practicing Sabbath is maybe to understand a little bit more about the why.
Yeah.
So yes, it's about rest, but it's also about enjoyment and connection.
I like that.
So it's taking a period of time where we would rest, enjoy, and connect with God, family, friends, and community.
Community.
Now, resting can look like slowing down in that period of time or being simply called unhurried.
Unhurried, sure.
You'll be taking time with your family, and that can encompass enjoying a movie together, playing a game. It might be taking more time to connect with God. You might take a little more time to pray or to read your Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Could be doing something with friends. It might be going to church. And this is really important to note. I read this a couple times, but Dan Allender, one of them, spoke about this. He said that church and Sabbath can overlap. However, they also can be distinct.
Sure.
It depends on you.
Right.
It's good to go to church. It's good to be connected to one, but Sabbath may for you happen on a different time, and that's okay. So I know that some people would say, does it have to? No, it doesn't. For some people,
Yeah.
and I believe it is Trish Harrison Warren, for her and her husband, church was part of Sabbath. That was
Yeah.
a thing for connection for them. That was important. And I know for other people, it would happen on a different day.
Yep.
And,
And I think for a lot of times for us as pastors,
yeah,
yes, we have some connection at church on Sundays, but typically it's a work day for us.
it is.
And so we don't always have a restful component to that day. And quite often I'm exhausted after church.
Yep.
And so I'm not always in a good place to connect with my family or other friends right away. So, so for lots of us, I would agree with that point that it doesn't always happen on Sunday at church.
Yeah.
But we still need to create a rhythm for it.
And that's the idea. It's a rhythm
Yeah.
of enjoyment, connection, and rest that works for you. So as much as it is about connecting and enjoying God, family, friends, and community, that doesn't mean you have to try to fit all of that also in
one
a single day.
Yeah.
Because that could be a little overwhelming. You're like, I got to do all these things. No,
Yeah.
I mean, you might have a Sabbath that is more God and family centered. You might have one, the following week or two or whatever that's more connection and enjoyment with community.
Sure.
And it doesn't need to try to fit everything into a single period of time, but these are those things that would be in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it is about setting aside time. Now, how often? Does it need to be once a week? Does it need to be a full day? Which are all questions we might have. However, what we're really trying to figure out at that point, are we doing it right? And when the focus is on, are we doing it right? It is a very big possibility that it hinders our ability to rest, enjoy. So
Because
just
it becomes a check mark.
exactly, or it just becomes you're not unrestful because you're like, did I do it right? Did I do this right? Am I doing this right? Am I doing that? Did I do this wrong? Is this right? Can I do this? Can I do that? You're probably not enjoying much.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not feeling rest. So just start with setting time aside.
Yep.
Maybe it's a half day. Yeah, do it. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks. Okay, just do it. I get people's schedules and seasons of life might not make the ideal possible. The point is finding set a time for enjoyment, connection, and rest.
Now, that being said, I do recommend if you can take a full day to do
can.
it. But if you can't, a half a day or sometimes even just a couple of hours spaced during the week can be just as helpful.
Yeah, and try to make it as much as you can reoccurring practice in life. You know, not just sort of like, oh, I did it the one time. Oh, maybe, hopefully I'll do it sometime again. Trying to figure out best you can, again, within the parameters that you have. Try to make it as reoccurring as you can. And what are we going to do or not do? Well, simple as this. We're not going to make a big long list.
Yep.
And I know we can find lists if you really, really need them, but I don't know that they're probably going to hinder more than help. So what do we want to do? Let's try this. Try to be present with God, yourself, and others. You know, it can look like in different ways. Like the Israelites refrained from doing things like they limited travel or they weren't supposed to cook. Well, if they're limiting travel, if you start to see what the limiting travel did, it kind of kept them in their community and in their family.
Yeah.
So instead of like saying, I don't travel, the idea, oh, what can I do to make sure that I'm connecting with community and family? Or the idea they couldn't cook. Well, I mean, let's face it, that's a far more involved process back then than it is now.
Yep.
I mean, you know, we talk about making things from scratch. That's all that was would have been done. You're making everything from as much scratch as you.
So they still had to eat on Sabbath, so they would prepare
They would prepare ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so what that happened is that allowed people to be, again, the ability to be more connected because they weren't in the kitchen or wherever they're preparing the meals for hours and hours and hours.
Many times the person preparing the meal can't connect with anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, maybe on Sabbath, it might be that as a family, actually doing something together, such as cooking, could be a place of connection. I have actually known people that is a big place of connection. They do it together, So it's not about the cooking. It's really, or not cooking, it's about the enjoyment and the connection. Because for some people, it might be that. For others, it might be better that is leftover a day. Or order in pizza day. Again, it's not about not doing, it's more about not doing the things that take away rest and enjoyment and connection, and doing the things that encourage it. Yeah. And so, that's essentially kind of like, you want a list. That's it. If it is encouraging connection, enjoyment, and rest, do that. Try to find that in a regular rhythm of life. So I hope this kind of gives at least a little bit of understanding of rest and Sabbath. Again, none of this is supposed to be nailed, figured out perfectly. Take your time. And again, if the biggest thing that you walk away from this moment is you got to figure out how to prioritize sleep, do that. That's a great place to start. It's going to help you in so many ways. And it's always going to help us in things like rest, enjoyment, and connection. So thank you so much for following along. We're going to talk about more spiritual practices in the upcoming weeks. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.